Hi, welcome back to Audio Storytime. I'm Nathan Joseph, and I'm going to be talking about space this week. Again, but this time I want to talk about working in a small space, particularly a small studio space, as I imagine a lot of people are working out of. So this is Studio 45. I call it Studio 45 because it's 45 square feet, and it's in a suburban basement. So it's 9 feet by 5 feet across. And I want to talk about a couple of different strategies I use to make this room sound bigger than it is. So, a couple problems that happen when working in a small space are that you get standing waves, especially in the bass frequencies. So, when you have close together parallel walls, the lower frequencies bounce off and cancel, and then they also constructively add together to get louder, so you get these peaks and troughs that make the room very uneven sounding. So that's a pretty big challenge. So you need to trap the bass in some way. Also, sort of low ceilings cause a problem as well for a similar issue. And so the worst case scenario is if you have a cube because you have, four sets of parallel walls. I guess more than four, right? So it's six because you have front, back, top, bottom, left, right, right? So that would be the worst case scenario. So fortunately, Studio 45 is sort of irregularly shaped. It's got this sort of strange cutout here that accommodates the radon exhaust fan, and then sort of the small ceilings. It does have carpet, so that helps absorb some of the sound. But then it does have these close walls, and despite this sort of small space, I was able to fit two large amps. I've got a Vox amplifier in here, and also a 4x10 Fender Bassman from the 1970s. And then I also have 52 units of analog outboard gear, rack units here lining the sides. And so one thing that you can do to help in a small space is actually having things in it that are irregularly shaped can help have the sound waves bounce around. So that can help the room sound bigger. One really great way to do it, some world-class studios have employed this. It adds ambiance, but it's also really good for diffusing sound. And bookshelves are fantastic. So books are all sort of different sizes. And so you have a wood bookshelf with a lot of different absorptive paper and cardboard, and different materials tend to scatter the sound waves differently. So I've tried to employ that in Studio 45. I like stone quite a bit. I like how stone sounds, but it has another property, and that's that all the stones are different sizes and shapes. I've used river rock on the desk over here. So I built a trough and then filled that with river stone. And so that serves as a diffusing surface because the sound waves hit the rocks and bounce off in all directions. So on the other side, at least this side of the studio, I built a grid and with canvas, and then into that grid I put stone as well. So there's quite a bit of 1-inch gravel overhead right now, and that helps this side of the room sound much bigger. So if the sound waves take a longer path to bounce around the room sounds bigger. So the other part of it is absorption. So we've got diffusion, right? So I've used all the different equipment. Both serves a purpose in that it sounds great and makes interesting sounds itself, but it also scatters sound waves as a diffusive surface. But then you've got absorption as well. And so I figured out a way to make a really low cost absorptive panel. So if you go to one of the big box stores, they have these project panels. It's purple foam. It's about 1 inch thick. It's made out of Formular, which is the traditional studio foam absorptive material that they put in the walls a lot. And so those panels run about $6 to $7. They're 2 by 2 feet, very easy to fit in your car. You don't have to get those giant 4 by 8, 4 feet by 8 foot panels that they also sell it in. And then you can cover that with canvas. So they also sell the canvas there because the foam itself, without anything on the front of it, has sort of a strange sound in the high frequencies. So I found that putting some sort of fabric, canvas is sort of what I prefer, but you can put anything over there that you like the look of and the sound of. But It does a couple things. You get the foam will absorb most of the frequencies, but then also by having a different material on the outside of it, you have the sound waves change energy. They have different impedances, so canvas is different than the foam. And there's also an air gap in there because you don't have it completely tight. So when the sound waves go, they hit canvas, air, foam. And then if they make it through, they hit the drywall in the back and then the concrete on the other side of the basement, and then they reflect back through, have to go back through all those different materials. So every time a sound wave hits a different material, it loses energy. And the more different those materials are, the more energy is lost. So you want to be able to have your studio monitors up loud so you can monitor well. You want to monitor quiet and loud. But if you are monitoring loud, you want to absorb that sound so you don't get too much interference with the reflective waves. So I have absorptive panels on both sides. The carpet helps as well. But then I also have foam panels where I put a sheet of plywood on the front for reflection. So I don't have those facing each other, so I don't create that parallel wall situation again. But I have them on different walls so that the sound waves have to take a different path. So if you can lengthen the path that the sound waves have to travel in your room, it can make it sound bigger, right? Because the longer path happens in a bigger room, or if you're in a smaller room, you have to do something to have it bounce around. So I also have on the panels on the ceiling, whether it's the stone hanging on the canvas or just a canvas and foam panel. So those are some of the strategies that I've taken to do that. Even with a lot of these panels, I did have sort of a standing wave somewhere around 80 to 100 hertz. So one thing that helped with that is my Genelec monitors have an active, it comes with a measurement mic, and then you can have it measure the room and then apply equalization. So it can help with any of those peaks that you can't quite get rid of with treatment. Although treating's better, it's still not going to be close to ideal and flat. So it can help to tune the room as well with the monitors themselves, in addition to taking care of that. But as I kept adding more and more panels, I was able to dampen down a lot of those resonant waves by quite a bit. I think it was 12 decibels up at like 100 hertz before I started, and then I got it down considerably to where it wasn't hard for the software then to even that out. So the room sounds a lot bigger, so I will track in here. I still have to find a good spot in the room. It sounds better under the stone with sort of the reflective desk as well. So the front of the room sounds better than the back of the room. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So hopefully some of these strategies can help you, because I would imagine a lot of us are working in small spaces and we're surrounded by drywall, which resonates as well. So, it's basically like plaster and paper and some of the mud they use to cover it. And drywall will ring, unfortunately. And so you'll want to treat that or cover it at least so that you don't have as much ringing coming through. But that's some of the other strategies. I did want to talk a little bit about what speakers can do. So bass is a pretty big problem in small rooms, or in general. Like bass trapping is a big challenge. To have a proper bass trap for some of the lowest frequencies, it would have to be enormous, like prohibitively enormous, like several meters long, right? So like 10 feet, 15 feet, even more. But one way that you can do that passively is actually loudspeakers. So they're able to make sound, but they also absorb sound. And so there's a really interesting scientific paper about this, where you can use loudspeakers in an active circuit to cancel out bass, but that's expensive and complicated. But even just having passive loudspeakers, not turned on, not attached to anything, those can absorb bass frequencies as well, and they're most effective around their resonant frequencies. So in here, I've got the Vox amp, like I was talking about. It's got a 1x12 speaker. Most 12-inch speakers have a resonant frequency somewhere around 50 to 60 hertz. So just having a speaker in the room helps capture some of the bass. Then I also have that basement with 4 10-inch speakers. And so those 10-inch speakers will have a slightly higher resonant frequency. And so even just being in the room, they'll capture some of that bass energy. There is a way that you can put an inductor on a speaker in a circuit. I think It's a simple passive component that when the speaker moves in response to the bass in your room, it'll generate a current in the inductor that'll then resist the movement of that speaker. So if you were to wire up a speaker with an inductor, you can tune that so that it's more effective and has a broader range of frequencies that it impacts. But the simpler thing to do is to just have speakers in your room, and they will capture some bass for you. So all these things have worked pretty well. I'm always working on Studio 45, trying to make it more useful. If I do want to track, though, this is really a one-person situation. As you can see, I'm shoulder to shoulder in analog outboard gear, which is awesome. And also, the cables don't have to be very long because I can run anything to anything in here with not a whole lot of cabling, although there's a lot of cabling running behind to make the patch bays work and to get it into the computer, which is in the closet back over there. But I have a long snake that I'll run it out into the main room over there, which is the TV room for the family. But it's got irregular walls, and with good mic placement, that can sound pretty good. And this becomes sort of a machine room where I can just have everything plugged in, run the snake out, hang the mics in the much bigger room that's 200 to 300 square feet for tracking if other musicians come over. So hopefully some of these strategies can help as you work in your small space. I don't know that everyone wants to build a wooden canopy in their basement closet, but it's worked quite well because I can hang mics from it and cables and absorption foam without putting too many holes in the wall. But even just building a few panels and using some of those, there's sticky putty that can hold these panels to the wall. Now, I have tried them on the ceiling. They do not work on the ceiling. They'll last about a week, and then randomly they will fall. So that's unpleasant and not optimal. But they have no problem holding these foam panels with the canvas I mentioned to the walls sideways. So those have been going strong at least 6 months or longer. In a future video, I will make a few of these and I'll show how easy it is. You just take the purple foam panel, you wrap the canvas or fabric around it, and just take packing tape. So that works perfectly well. It's not fancy, but it is very effective. So thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully some of this was useful, and we'll go over some other topics in the future.